And I want to talk to you about a pyramid of strategy, how we move up from the base, our foundation, up to the actionable parts of strategic thinking. So, place we begin is the base is core values. Well, on top of that, we have our mission. And I'm just going to briefly define mission right now is what we're currently doing. That'll become a basis then for establishing our vision. The vision, we're going to do all of the analysis of the marketplace to find out what the customer wants and begin to make modifications in the way we conduct our mission to meet the needs of the customer. And our vision will be to try and meet the needs of the customer. To do this, we have to set goals. And we're looking at something that's a long-term kind of a thing, where it's something that can be done, it can be accomplished, but certainly not in the short term. Goals are made up of accomplishment of a series of objectives. Objectives are much more bite-sized, probably something that would take less than a year to accomplish, sometimes only a week for that matter. Goals, on the other hand, are something that lasts for 10, 20 years. If we develop our objectives, we end up having to do a plan for that, and that we're going to call strategy. So the underlying thing here, the whole pyramid, is based on the idea of having a strategy, but the actual marking or doing of the work takes place at the high level after we've done these other things. That is, identify our mission, determine what our vision should be, establish long-term goals, and lay out a series of objectives that we want to accomplish. So let's just begin at the beginning with core values. And as I said, this is something that we all believe. And as I said, I gave lip service to it. That was how I ran my early part of my career. And what the core values are the bedrock, the basic beliefs that define a company. And in one of my previous lectures, I told you that we're going to use core values and basic beliefs as interchangeable. The terms are interchangeable. And this is what you expect when you go to work for a company. This is what you expect it to look like. Even if you hadn't really thought about it, you'll know if the company's values are the same as yours. And what happens is the company culture evolves out of those core values. So if you were to go, if you're working for a larger company where you could actually get into the lobby and sit and watch people as they go about their daily tasks, you'd find that they live out their core values in terms of the company culture. So the company culture sort of evolves out of the basic values that the company has. Incidentally, I've gone back to my desktop computer, and we're going to see if we can't continue to make this work. I had trouble with the laptop last time, so I figured it was time to go back to this. So core values, the purpose of the core values, as we define this as an activity, is to tell the community, the business community, how we do business. This is something where you look out rather than looking in. And it defines a kind of acceptable personal and corporate behaviors that we have. You probably have noticed within the last month or so that the president of McDonald's had to step down because his personal values turned out to be unacceptable for the corporation. He was having a liaison with one of the employees in a way that it affected company operations. In the last week or so, the president of a company called Nikola, which is making electrical trucks, has had to step down because it appears as though there was kind of a flim-flam in the way they were doing their financial reporting and the way they were laying out the company for people to make observations about it. They put out a truck that didn't have electrical engine in it. Of course, it wouldn't be an electrical engine; it would be an electrical motor. But it was kind of a misrepresentation, and he was forced to step down because his personal and corporate values or his actions were in conflict with his personal and his corporate values. And these are guides for decisions and actions for the individual and for the organization. This is what is expected of you in the marketplace. So why do we have core values and where do they come from? Well, first of all, they're the non-negotiable beliefs of the company. And this is the area where we and our personal behavior aren't going to stray to do anything that would injure those non-negotiable beliefs that the company has. And what we're going to learn is that mission and vision and strategy are all subordinate to the core values. And that's why they're really important, because they are foundational. So as the mission and visions change, they will change as circumstances change and as the company grows or fails to grow. It has to redefine its vision for where it wants to be going based on market realities. But the core values remain the same. They remain the anchor to hold it in place. Now, when I was, my first employer was IBM. And knowing that that was a company very much based on values, after I left, I started up several companies in my career. And I always established core values for the companies when I started them. It was an exercise, but that's what it was. It was not fundamental to the way I lived. It was an exercise that has to be done. That was how I did it. And so I gave them lip service. And my behavior always reflected what my core values were. But I didn't communicate this to anyone else. And therefore, it had no effect on the company's performance. And this goes back to the first 4 words. Does anybody remember the first 4 words I asked you to memorize? And I know you did, because I said you should memorize them. I'm listening.
Professor?
Yes.
Is it the focus, simplicity, clarity, and consistency?
It's you're absolutely right. Focus, simplicity, consistency, and clarity. So what I was doing was I was not keeping it simple by communicating what I wanted to have as a way of behavior. And you must do that. You must be able to communicate. And it helps the people when they know what the values are, helps them to focus their activity. And who was the brilliant lady who had the answer?
Trisha.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's focus, simplicity, and then what are the other 2? Forget.
Focus, simplicity, clarity, and this is, I'm going to get it. Consistency. That's what people expect. If they're going to be effective, they have to know that the instructions are simple, that you are laser focused, And I hope you pick that up for the game, that you are going to have to pick a strategy and focus on it with great consistency. So as I said, when I started companies, I always had core values. And what I did was just merely adopted the values of the company that the one company that I knew. And I'll tell you, the first day I walked into that company, they gave me a business card, and on the back of it, it had the company's core values. They called them basic beliefs, and they were respect for the individual, approach every problem as though it can be solved in a superior manner, and give the best customer service in the world. And that was in 1966, so that's now 54 years ago. And I remember those because they were branded onto my brain. That was how we would conduct our activity in the company. And these were extremely important for IBM. At that time, IBM is still a great company. But at that time, it was probably the most desirable industrial company to work for in the world. And a lot of it just really revolved around how they set up their core values. So for me, I just took those core values and it was copy and paste, and there was not really any thought about it at all. And surprisingly, one of the mottos of IBM, it's that little plaque that was on the back of every manager's desk. It was to think. And no copy and paste. You're supposed to be thinking. Well, IBM's values were really not the company's values. They're the values of the people who make up the company. Now, IBM began in about 1916, 1917, somewhere around that time frame. And a man named Thomas Watson was hired in by a guy named Sherman Fairchild. Sherman Fairchild's company is, or was called Fairchild Semiconductor, and it's one of the important companies in this country. And he had hired in Thomas Watson to run the company. And when Watson began his tenure, the first thing he did was to set up the core values that I repeated to you: respect for the individual, approach every problem as though it can be accomplished in a superior manner, and give the best customer service in the world. And that was drilled into the brain of everybody that came to work there. And people didn't come to work there once they understood that that was the values of the company. They didn't come to work there unless they really believed those as important parts of their life. Thomas Watson got old, and his son took over the company probably about 1945. And maybe it's earlier than that, maybe it's 1935. Thomas Watson Jr., one of the great entrepreneurs in 20th century America. And he not only believed in those core values, but he actually wrote a book about it, and you can get a copy of it. We were given a copy when we came to work at IBM, and were required to read it and sign off a certificate that we'd read it. Every year we had to go back and review it and sign this document that we had read it. And it's called A Business and Its Beliefs. You could get it on Amazon. And what it does is take each of these three values, these or basic beliefs, and expand it into an entire chapter to show how that was used within the IBM company. So that's a big deal for IBM. It was a big deal. It was one of the things in my corporate life that was a constant. I knew that was an immovable object. I knew that that's the way it always would be at IBM. So let's take a look about your core values. And the question I raise to you is, how do you want to be known? What values do you think are important in conducting your life? How do you want others to see you? And then a biggie, what do you want to see on your epitaph when you die? So does anybody want to volunteer anything that they view as a core value in their own life? And incidentally, we all have them. We got them. I don't know if that was a thing that came just by virtue of being born, but you develop them very quickly as a child. Maybe from your grandparents or your parents, maybe from interaction with other people, but you have them. So what do you all think?
You want us to answer the questions on this slide?
Yes, you don't have to put anything on
Okay.
the slide itself, but I'd like to just hear your, as each of you identify yourself, what you think is an important for at least one in your life.
I believe for me, it's very, very important to stand on my principles, morals, integrity. No one's perfect, but I feel like as long as you're a decent person, that really matters. I really try to be as decent and respectful as possible. Also, I like to be defined by how I helped others. I've done a lot of work in the community and worked at community centers, so I would definitely like to be defined by how I work with others, and then also defined by how I upheld my morals, values, and my integrity standards I
Okay.
grew up with.
Is this Angel?
Uh-huh.
I thought that was you. Yeah, it's very important. And we are going to stray from our core values. We're going to do things that are wrong. And that was why a couple of sessions ago, when I showed you that slide about living a balanced life, that I referred to finding that North Star, the place where you will aim your life. And as you get away from it, you know, we all do. What we do is we keep correcting that course so we get back on track. We do live in a world where forgiveness is an important part of our lives. So thank you, Angel. Who else has something that they believe is important?
For me, what is important to me, adding on to what Angel said about living with integrity, being known for always having, doing the right thing by others, never wanting to do something with an intention said and doing something else.
Okay, so integrity is one of the words that defines that.
Honesty, in
Yeah.
a business aspect, committed to like customers, like not say that I'm going to do something and then not do it, or promise something and under deliver.
Yeah, it's better to over deliver than to under deliver. Is this was this Daisy?
Yes.
How about that? So for me, it's honesty, honor, and integrity. Those are three bedrock principles in how I live my life.
Those are good ones to live by.
Thank you. And I'm willing to be held accountable for my behavior. And I can tell you that there's been times in teaching this class where I've had to do a double take, have to step back and say, well, wait a second. This is not consistent with what I believe. And I owe it to my students to consistently display and consistently live out what my beliefs are. So it's very, very important to me. Anyone else want to volunteer some? And who was that just gave me that nice compliment?
Daisy?
Daisy again? Thank you. Who else would have volunteered something?
Professor, I can.
And who's this speaking?
Trisha.
Okay, good.
Definitely the ones that you, like all of you guys have mentioned, or, I feel like that's what we grow up to aspire to be. But to add to that, I would definitely say what I get told a lot would be my open-mindedness and my positivity. And I feel that, it helps to be open to change always, because you never know what's going to happen. And then, if you think positive, positive things happen. If you think negative, negative things happen. So I'd rather not think that way.
Yeah, that's right. We can change the world either way.
Absolutely.
And I don't know. I think I may have showed you that picture of from To Kill a Mockingbird, where Atticus was talking to his daughter, and he said that everyone needs to put on the other person's skin and see things from their point of view. Get under somebody's skin and be able to understand from their perspective. That's a very, very good trait.
What was that one? What did you say it was? I'm going to look it up.
Okay, well, I'm actually going to help you out here.
Oh, there you go.
Let's see. This takes a little bit of time to find it, but it's worth it. Now I'm gonna see if I can get it up on the screen. How's that? Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Huh?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. That's a great movie. I remember when my granddaughter was about, probably 8 or 9 years old, and she saw that movie on TV. And no sooner did she see it all the way through that she said, "I want to see that Killingbird movie again." It's a wonderful story. Okay, I'm going to switch back here and put on where I was. I think it's worth considering that last thing. What do you want to be on? What do you want to see on your epitaph? How do you want to be remembered? A lot of your immortality is based on how people remember you. So this what we're talking about here, the individual's core values are really the source of the corporate core values. And as you impute your personal values to the company, they become the source of the company's value and cultures. And they'll last long after you've left the company. They will remain probably for the life of the company. And what happens is people hire people who have the same values, and therefore it begins to perpetuate itself. So as you build your team, what you're going to do is to look for people who share your values. Now, as I said, when I was at IBM, I considered this as one of the fixed points in the universe, that those core values were always going to be there. And then about 10 years ago, And this really shattered my world. IBM rewrote their core values, their basic beliefs. And that was, as I said, about 10 years ago. The company really was the #1 company for a period from about 1958 until about 1975, almost 1980. And then it began to lose its mojo, and it lost it pretty dramatically toward the end of the century. And so the then president of the company, a man named Sam Palisano, decided to go in and challenge the company to rewrite its beliefs. And so he set up a 72-hour period when they had an intranet set up for everyone in the company, 250,000 people, and asked them to volunteer their ideas about how they would want to have the core values look. And this is what they came up with. Dedication to every client's success, innovation that matters for our company and the world, trust and personal responsibility in all relationships. Now, if you go back and look at the values that they had, dedication to every client's success sounds an awful lot like give the best customer service in the world. Innovation that matters for our company and for the world sounds a lot like approach every problem as though it can be solved in a superior manner. And trust and personal responsibility in all relationships sounds an awful lot like respect for the individual. So after 72 hours and 250,000 people making inputs, the value statement that they came up with was almost the same as they'd had originally. And you would say, well, Sam Palisano was taking a big risk when he put that out there, because he could end up with something that didn't look anything like what the company portrays itself to be. But it really was very low risk, because for 100 years, they'd been hiring people who grew up with and stayed with the company on the basis of having respect for the individual, approaching every problem as though it could be solved in a superior manner, and giving the best customer service in the world. So that's what was going to happen. Those values were going to be displayed, again, using slightly different words. Now, when they put this out, they put it out with about a 2 or 3 sheet document that took each of those values and had a paragraph explaining how that applied to their work. This is not unlike what Tom Watson Jr. had done in his book, Business and Its Beliefs, because we do want to be able to communicate. These are simple statements. We do want to be able to communicate the full impact of them to all the people in the company. So I think there more than one of you is in HR in this class. In fact, I think in one of my other classes, it must be about a third of the people are involved in HR and personnel. So the question that you might be asking is, how does an existing company create core values when no written core values exist? And but the reality is that those values are there. That's what you've been living all the way along. Now, I had a customer associate that was going through this exercise. His company was about 40 or 50 years old. He had inherited from his parents and had done very well with it. He was highly respected. But they never had any written core values, and he wanted to establish those. And so what he did, and this I think is a great way to do it, he got all of his core managers together and got them involved in participating in the process. Now he had about 200 employees, and so he had maybe 8 or 10 key personnel, which was the first level at which they would begin to develop these values. And what they did was they met and brainstormed over the question, what do you believe company's core values should be? And after brainstorming all day, they prioritized a list. And he wanted to see him get to, well, first of all, I'd say he gave no input whatsoever as to what he wanted to see in terms of the core values themselves. One thing he did want to do was keep it down to about 3 to 5 core values, because it's very difficult for the human mind to focus on a variety of different things. So let's pick the most important ones and try and keep it in an area of 3 to 5. He did not insist on that, though. In fact, he didn't even mention it. He wanted to get as many ideas as they could get, and they came up with about 25. And then as a result of negotiating and talking back and forth, they whittled it down to about 10 or about 8. He did want to push it a little bit further because he thought that was too many, but he didn't say that. He said, look, go home and let's think about it. Let's come back and see how we feel about it after sleeping on it for a day or two. And when people came back, they were able to whittle it down to about 3 to 5 basic values. And then they took and they wordsmithed it into simple and memorable statements, because everything's got to be simple. So then right away, he began applying it. And he asked the managers to rate themselves. The same group, rate yourself. Are you on board with these beliefs? Can you really feel those internally? Can you adapt yourself? If you're not really with it on all of them, can you adapt yourself to make them your beliefs? Are you flexible enough to do that? And then he announced that measurable adherence to these beliefs will be part of your performance plan. Now, with medium-sized, well, I think any company that has managers really should have performance plans for the individual managers. And so these core values were designed or were articulated in a way that said, this is going to be part of your performance plan. It's going to help determine your pay. You've got to get yourself aligned with these core values. And then for those who were unwilling to adapt, what he said, and this happens automatically, if you really live your core values, a company really lives its core values, and there are people that don't really subscribe to them fully, they'll end up leaving because it's a bad fit for them. And it's not a matter of throwing somebody under the tires. It's just that people realize they should go to some other place. And the thing that you're trying to strive for is you want to make sure that everybody's rowing in the same direction. And it is so easy to get out of sync with other people in an organization if you don't really live out the values and the strategic statements that you have. When you don't, that's what you get. Now, how about implementing this for the rest of the organization? What you do is you make it a mantra. This is something everyone needs to know. They have to be able to repeat it, just as I now know all of you can repeat those 4 simple words that I said were important for you in dealing with strategy. So what I would do is prepare a poster with the core values on it, have a copy of it in the corporate lobby, one in my office if I'm the president, one out on the shop floor where everybody can see it when they're punching in and out on their time clock, and any other, the corporate lunchroom, any place where there are people where they're going to be, to remind them of what to do. Then make sure every team member gets their own personal copy. And what I do is put that in the pay envelope so that they would get that. I would make sure that there was an explanation each of those core values, so that it's not just a matter of repeating a series of half a dozen words. It's actually understanding what those words mean. Then when I would have management meetings, just like they do in a 12-step program, the person that's going to give the talk for that day or have the floor for the meeting, first of all, just as you pick one of the 12 steps and discuss it before giving your testimony, that person would pick one of the core values and explain how it's used in the company and what it means to him. And then go ahead with the rest of your meeting. But make it something that's always in the forefront of everyone's mind, so that people will live out those values every day. And then, because it starts at the top and has to trickle down to everyone else, get buy-in from every team member. And I can't express to you how important that is. And I'll tell you why here in just a second. Well, how do you use these things day by day? You use it in selecting new hires. It's a framework for disciplining and directing coworkers. And it provides an objective way to ease people out who don't buy into the values. Now, this really came home to me the first time I had to fire somebody. And there was a fellow who was not doing a good job, and it's pretty obvious that he was not was not doing the work. Most of the time, if people are marginal, it's not because they're incompetent. It's because they've either lost interest or just are not willing to work to do what that particular job requires. So one day I came in and I knew I was going to have to let this guy go, and I called him into my office. I said, "Come on in here, I want to talk to you." And so he said, "Yeah, I've been wanting to talk to you too." And he came into my office and closed the door. And he said, "You know, you're the nicest boss I've ever worked for." Well, that's pretty tough to then say, "Well, that's good to know, but I'm not your boss anymore because you're being fired." But that was the first sentence he said. And the second sentence was, "I've made a decision to give you my resignation. I've chosen a job someplace else." Well, I almost did a standing broad jump over my desk to get to him and shake his hand and wish him well. But I made up, at that time, I made up my mind I'd never let that happen again, because that was unfair to him and unfair to me. And so by using these core values in selecting people that you know are going to have the same thought pattern, the same important elements of importance in their life, you make it easier on yourself. It is a framework for disciplining, because you can say, look, these are the values. How are you living up to them? Where are you falling short? What can I do to help you to be more effective with your job? And use the core values as a basis for that. Then once you do that, you also need to make sure, because I said this is something where we tell out. You want to be able to make sure your customers know what your core values are, because that's how you're going to conduct your business. So the first thing to do is go ask them and survey them. Are we making it clear who we are and what we are? Do you understand that we are committed to giving the best customer service in the world? Will you call us up short if we aren't? So it's these kinds of things where you can get the customers to get in your corner and root for you. So as I said, the core values are an inside out view of the company. And later on, what I'm going to show you is the mission statement is an outside in perspective. Now I want to show you, I hope all of you had a chance to see the Jackie Robinson, this movie about Jackie Robinson, 42. It came out about 5 or 6 years ago. And I had not realized that the star of that was, well, I'm not catching his name now, but he was the guy who played the Black Panther in the movie. He's a really fine individual who just recently died of, I think he had brain cancer. So this is clip out of the film about Jackie Robinson. And Robinson is on your right, and Pee Wee Reese is next to him. Pee Wee Reese was a shortstop for the Dodgers. In 1947, Jackie Robinson was selected to be the first black player in the major leagues. And he was chosen because he was very competitive, very good, had a fiery temper, but had the ability to control that temper. And he was a local boy. He went to UCLA, started off at Pasadena City College, and then went to UCLA, where he was a four-letter man. He played football, basketball, track, and baseball, and his weakest sport was baseball. But when he was brought up to the majors, he was subject to incredible abuse for the entire year. The other teams ridiculed him and called him all kinds of nasty names. The fans had nothing but bad things to say. And even his own teammates shunned him as he had to pretty much play all by himself. This particular scene took place in my hometown, Cincinnati. And in that time, the outfield looked just as it did in this movie, just as it did when I used to go to that ballpark in the mid-1950s, about 8 years after Robinson came into the big leagues. And Pee Wee Reese had family in Kentucky, which is right across the river. And Kentucky is a very much more southern state than Ohio. And so there's a lot of prejudice down there toward blacks. And this is the scene where Jackie is accepted by Pee Wee Reese and was able to really be adjusted. And what Reese is going to do is explain, looking out, what his core values are.
They can say all they want. We're just here to play ball.
It's just a bunch of crackpots still fighting the Civil War.
Well, hell, we'd have won that son of a gun if the cornstalks would have held out. We just ran out of ammunition.
Better luck next time, Pee Wee.
Ain't gonna be a next time, Jax. All we got's right here. Thank you, Jax.
What are you thanking me for?
I got family up there from Louisville. I need them to know. I need them to know who I am.
Hey, number one! You playing ball or socializing?
Playing ball, up.
Come on! Don't let us get to you!
Playing ball. Maybe tomorrow we'll all wear 42. That way they won't tell us apart.
And of course, at the beginning of every season now, every player in the major leagues wears 42 in his honor. And as I said, that was the point at which he told out, Pee Wee Reese told out what his values were, and allowed Jackie to be accepted for who he was. Of course, that year he won the most valuable player, as well as the most valuable rookie, and he had an outstanding career. So Peter Drucker says core values trump strategy. And when you have a conflict between strategy and your core values, you always want to recenter on the core values, that is the most important thing. So there you are. And that's all I have for you tonight. What did I tell you that you needed to be familiar with next time?